Please be seated. Welcome everyone to the October 16th meeting of the City Council of Half Moon Bay. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do roll call first.
Councilmember Eisen.
Here.
Councilmember Reddick.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rarback.
Here.
Mayor Penrose.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. We are now going to have a presentation about the San Mateo County Sea Change Project.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Jill Egas. I'm the Community Development Director here, and I am happy to introduce Hillary Papendick, who will present an update on the Sea Change Initiative. Hillary is a Sustainability Program Manager for the county's Office of Sustainability and leads the Climate Change Work Group. She oversees the county's climate resilience and mitigation efforts. This includes planning for sea level rise and other climate change impacts, reducing greenhouse gas emissions through the county's climate action plans. It also includes work to engage community members, youth, and businesses through the Sustainability Academy, the Youth Exploring Sea Level Rise Science Program, and the Green Business Program. So Hillary is a very busy person, and she's delightful to work with, and I think you'll enjoy her presentation.
Thank you for having me here tonight. So for my presentation, I will be giving an overview of the Sea Change SMC initiative, and I'll talk about the release of our vulnerability assessment, share some results for what we learned for Half Moon Bay, and then go over next steps. So under the leadership of Supervisor Pine, we launched the Sea Change Initiative in 2015. Is this echoing, or does it sound okay? Okay. The goal of the initiative is to raise awareness about sea level rise and to increase the understanding of the issue. We're also working to coordinate on sea level rise planning efforts across the county. Evidence shows that the cost of doing nothing to prepare for sea level rise exceeds the cost of adapting by about 4 to 10 times. And this is an issue that's beyond what the county can address in each individual city, and this is one reason to work collaboratively across the county and the cities. So here's a graph that we put together based on the latest state sea level rise guidance. This shows that there's a 66% chance that sea level reach about 1/2 foot by 2030, 1 foot by 2050, and 3.5 feet by 2100. So this shows 3 of the scenarios that were presented in the state sea level rise guidance. The 66% chance is the low. We could see higher amounts of sea level rise depending on how fast we reduce greenhouse gas emissions and how fast ice sheets melt. So the high-end scenario there is an extreme ice melt scenario. We've already seen about 8 inches of sea level rise as measured at the San Francisco Bay tide gauge. So next I'll go into the vulnerability assessment. The vulnerability assessment looked at what are all the different things like our highways, schools, critical facilities, different populations and habitats that could be at risk from different amounts of sea level rise on the coast and on the bay. So we looked at flooding and erosion scenarios. We didn't have sea level rise data for south of Half Moon Bay, so the scope of the study is Half Moon Bay North on the coast and then the entire bay side. The report was accepted by the Board of Supervisors on March 13th, and when we released the report, we put together a website and a highlights document, which I brought copies and put these on the table. One major component of the report was case studies. So we looked at 30 individual assets, which are like the highways and the wastewater treatment plants throughout the county. And I'll go into more detail on the Half Moon Bay case studies. So this map shows the different scenarios that we used in the report. We looked at 3 sea level rise scenarios and 1 erosion scenario. We looked at a storm today, and then that storm plus 3 feet, and then plus 6.6 feet. The primary effects of sea level rise are an increase of flooding and erosion, as well as an increase in saltwater intrusion into groundwater aquifers. On the coast, one of the main concerns is an increase in erosion. However, low-lying areas could also experience increased inundation, including inundation of our beaches and other areas. So here's a map showing the case studies for the Half Moon Bay area. I listed all of the case studies that we did for the coast side, and the first 5 in bold are those that are in the Half Moon Bay area. So they include Surfers Beach, Murata Road, the wastewater treatment plant, Half Moon Bay landfill, and the coastal trail. And I'll now go into detail on 3 of these. So first, the Surfers Beach case study looked at State Route 1 and its vulnerability to sea level rise. We found this area is highly vulnerable to wave overtopping and erosion. It already experiences, as you probably all know, during high tides and storm events, some overtopping occurs. The highway sees about 28,000 cars per day on average and provides regional and tourist access to businesses, residents, beaches, and parks. There's a stormwater line that runs just north of the highway and a force main storm sewer under the highway. Some potential solutions for this area are to place additional sand on the beach, which the Harbor District is currently considering as a pilot project. Other options are to potentially relocate the highway or continue to use rocks or seawall to protect. Another example case study that we looked at is the Sewer Authority Midcoast Side wastewater treatment plant. We found that the treatment plant is first affected by sea level rise with about 4 feet of sea level rise plus a 1% annual chance storm. It's worth noting that the Pillar Cedos Creek runs adjacent to the plant, and it could be affected sooner if this creek overtops. If the plant were flooded, we found that electrical equipment, underground facilities, including the electrical transformer, and then various other mechanical equipment could be affected. Also, if salt water were to enter into the system at any point, so if it were to get into a pump station, it could affect the treatment process as well. Some potential solutions are to look closely at the creek overtopping and see about raising berms. It's also, since we looked and saw that the plant is first really only affected during storms, steps could be taken to waterproof the electrical equipment and power distribution systems. The plant could also add a renewable power source, which could help if the power were to go out. So the last example is the Half Moon Bay landfill. This is a closed landfill that's owned and maintained by the county, and it's located in Half Moon Bay at Poplar Beach, just south of the parking lot. The landfill was an illegal dump until 1958, and then the county assumed management and operated the site as a landfill from 1971 to 1976. It was then graded and capped in 1978 and closed in 1998. We currently monitor the landfill for methane gas and water quality as required by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. We found that the landfill is vulnerable to erosion, and the county has actually already put a concrete block mat at part of the landfill to reduce erosion. Some solutions for the landfill include potentially relocating part of or all of the waste. The other option is to continue putting revetments along the edge of the bluff. The county is currently evaluating what it would look like to relocate part or all of the waste to see what the cost would be for that. So this next slide shows some of the work that the Sea Change team has planned in the coming year. One important part is finishing the South Coast vulnerability assessment so that we have a complete look at vulnerability in the county. United States Geological Survey, USGS, is working on completing the sea level rise modeling for that area. We also are working on developing a menu of potential adaptation strategies and policy templates for use by the county and cities in different planning and policy documents. We also received grant funds from SB1 from Caltrans to start looking at other climate change impacts, including wildfire, precipitation, and extreme heat. So this work will be kicking off soon. Here are just some immediate next steps. We're in the process of hiring our consultant team for the Civil Rights Toolkit and the Caltrans grant. And in the coming months, we'll be establishing a climate collaborative to help further to continue this work in partnership with cities and others. So stay tuned for information about that. And that's all I have today. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Hillary. Council?
I just want to say, I'm very familiar with the materials, so I don't have any questions, but I think the county is doing an outstanding job at leading on these really important issues, and I think they have a great staff. So thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Hillary, thank you for a very good report. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next, I would love to ask David Bosch to come to the podium. Thank you. Whereas David Bosch joined the Half Moon Bay team in January 2018 as interim city manager to fill the critical role as the city council carried out its search for a permanent city manager. And whereas Mr. Bosch's lengthy professional experience, including as Menlo Park City Manager, San Mateo County Manager, and Placer County Manager, gave him the skills, insight, and high level of proficiency and expertise to smoothly and seamlessly apply his leadership to the city's operations. I'm not going to go through the rest of this. Now, therefore, be it known that the City Council of the City of Half Moon Bay do hereby thank Mr. David Bosch for his diligent efforts as Half Moon Bay's interim city manager, commends him for his responsiveness to the City Council needs, his cheerful demeanor, and his 24/7 availability, and applauds his thorough and painstaking work to further the City Council's goals and objectives while working to ensure a smooth transition to the permanent city manager, and offers him its great appreciation for assisting Half Moon Bay as it progresses to its next chapter in serving this community. Thank you, David. We're going to now break for refreshments. Right over there. Can everyone please take their seat? Thank you. We are reconvening our meeting. Next up are mayor's announcements of community activities. I want to let everybody know about the October 23rd, 6 p.m. meeting at the Ted Adcock on housing. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful presentation. We've got some great housing experts to come in and talk to you. And it'll be a follow-up from the first one that we had about a month and a half ago. I attended the Harvest Dinner Benefit for Coastside Hope. Farmer John was there presiding and speaking about the history of farming on the coast. We had wonderful food. All of the vegetables were locally grown. It was fabulous. I also attended as a judge of the homecoming at Half Moon Bay High School for their homecoming couple murals that were painted and dances presented by freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Pretty fun. I attended a Cabrillo Unified School District meeting and was part of a group discussing future plans for the Big Lift program, which is a wonderful program. Took a tour of the new batch plant at Andrini's and attended the annual Sierra Club dinner. There is nothing to report out from recent closed sessions. Does anyone on council have anything else they want to announce?
Sure. On October 21st, this Sunday at 7 o'clock, it's going to be the last of the 3 chances that the city council candidates have to debate each other. It's going to be 7 o'clock, October 21st, at the library. It should be a really good chance for the public to get to know who the city council candidates are, and I urge everyone to come. I hope you should be getting your ballots in the mail this week. So please vote. Please come to the October 21st meeting.
That's what they said last week. Yeah. Has anybody gotten their ballot yet?
Did he?
No.
They were going to be postmarked yesterday. They had a printing error, so it was delayed a week.
We heard. I don't believe a word of it. City manager updates to council.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. We have a couple this evening, but before I welcome Jennifer Chong up to the microphone, let me take a moment to thank Yulia Carter for her service to the city of Half Moon Bay. I informed the council that just last week, Yulia tendered her resignation. She's been lured away to another city here in the Bay Area, and so she'll be departing Half Moon Bay at the end of the month. And so just like we're looking forward to welcoming our new city manager at the end of the month, we're also transitioning Yulia's responsibilities so that we can make that operation as seamless as possible. But Yulia's done just an outstanding job for the city in the 3.5 years she's been here, and I just want to recognize and thank her for her service.
Yulia, stand up so people know who you are. Come on. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And with that, let me invite Jennifer Chong from our Public Works Department up to make a presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. As Mr. Bosch mentioned, my name is Jennifer Chong. I am the Management Analyst in the Public Works Department, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight to give you an update on some of the sustainability efforts that have been going on throughout the city the past few months. So on Saturday, August 11th, we had our summer cleanout recycling event, co-sponsored by Republic Services. A couple of their representatives are here tonight in the audience. This was the first time that we included e-waste recycling and HHW recycling at this kind of event. In addition to those two new services, we had our typical compost giveaway and our paper shredding event. Overall, I think that we can definitely say that the event was a huge success. We feel we had about probably 175 households that showed up, and you can tell by the numbers up there. I'm not going to go through and read them all for you, but we definitely generated or got a lot of the waste out of the city of Half Moon Bay. I do want to point out that we collected 2,315 gallons of HHW. And what HHW is your aerosols, your paints, your pesticides. And these are a few of the pictures of how much waste we generated that day. So it was definitely a need that the community took advantage of, and we look forward to having another event in the spring. Another event that happened recently was the Coastal Cleanup hosted by the Coastside Land Trust. This happened Saturday, September 15th. They had a great turnout, 85 adults, 20 kids. Again, Republic Services was a co-sponsor for that. They provided the garbage services. They had some volunteers out from the Ritz-Carlton that brought donuts and coffee, and just a really great opportunity for the community to come together. Something I do want to point out was that this year they collected 366 pounds of garbage. In past years, that number has been above 700 pounds for the event. And what I would like to propose is that the reason that that number has come down significantly this year is because we started that Coastal Cleanup pilot program. And we're really excited to bring a presentation back to the council next month to provide you some numbers and to show you what kind of impact that program has been having lately. So something to look forward to next time. We have another opportunity for residents here and in all of San Mateo County to drop off more electronics next month. So, Saturday, November 3rd, we're going to be having an electronics-only event, so no HHW this time, but your computers, your small appliances, your radios, we'll take all of that if you live within the city of Half Moon Bay or anywhere in the county. The event will be at the City Hall on Kelly Avenue. We're shutting down that street, and all you have to do is drive through, and we'll pick up all of your items out of your car. So that's something that's coming up, and we really welcome all residents to come out and take advantage of this free service. Yes, so we're having an event here November 3rd, and all residents in Half Moon Bay are also welcome to go to the event in Daly City on October 27th. So it's open to all county residents. So either one or both if you have a lot of e-waste you'd like to get rid of. The event is from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. noon. So hopefully get in before visitors come and get out before all the traffic starts is the intention. Some other sustainability efforts that have been going on in the city is a lighting upgrade that happened in all of the city facilities. So if you'll notice, in this facility, we went ahead and we converted all of the lighting to LEDs. So LEDs are expected to last longer than most of our lifetime. So we're hoping that this will cut down not only on waste in terms of the amount of energy that we're using, but it will also cut down on some of the costs of maintenance and just equipment. So the total project cost to convert this building, City Hall, the train depot, and the EOC came out to about $38,000, and all of that was paid through a grant that we got through from the county. So, and the additional funds that we have left over, we're looking at potentially doing some additional retrofits, like maybe some sensor lightings in some of the buildings. Some more numbers just to give you an idea of what this impact means environmentally. We've taken about 3 cars off the road per year. We've saved 28,000 kilowatt hours and saved about 40 acres of forest, and this is annually. And also monthly, we save about $370 per month on our electricity bill by doing this retrofit. And then the last project that I wanted to just mention to the City Council is the CIP number 3, our 37. This is the EV charging station project. We received a grant from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District for $12,000 to install 3 different EV charging stations throughout the city. The first was already installed at the library as part of the grand opening, and we have 2 more locations that we are looking to install by the end of this year. So one of the ones that we are looking at installing is in front of La Piazza, basically right on the side where Miramontes Street is. And then the other location that we're still looking into is somewhere on Mill Street, potentially in front of the Half Moon Bay Inn.
The charging stations, will they each accommodate 2 automobiles?
Yes, so there will be dual port level 2 charging stations, so faster than the level 1s, not as fast as the DC chargers, but it will accommodate 2 cars.
Great.
And that is my last slide. So at this time, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jennifer. The last I'd heard was you were thinking of installing a charging station at the Ted Adcock Center, which I personally could use. Is that not happening?
So we're definitely still looking, that's still definitely an option. The reason that we had held off on potentially installing one here at this time is because we have a CIP project that is supposed to look at this whole property as a whole to see, I think it's the Ted Adcock Community or Civic Center plan, and we were hesitant to make an installation here that we may have to relocate or spend additional funds to locate within the next couple of years. So.
Thank you. And a comment, the city is using 100% renewable electricity, which is a wonderful thing. And if I could make a plug for individual people who use electricity in the county or in the city, you can go to what's called Echo 100, which will cost a little bit more than PG&E, but you're guaranteed that you're going to be buying 100% renewable energy, and I highly recommend it. It's well worth doing that for the community, for the planet, and the city has already done it for all its electrical use, so you should also join. Thank you.
And what is the average increase in cost for an average household? $5.
Okay, the default plan that you've all signed up for, unless you opted out, is what's called Echo, what's it called?
Echo Plus, I think.
Echo Plus, and that's a guaranteed 5% less than PG&E rates. The Echo 100 is approximately 2% more, and this is the generation rates. The total bill may not be as much different as that, because 2/3 of your bill does not come from generation costs, but from distribution and billing that PG&E charges. But you're guaranteed, if you do the Echo Plus, rates 5% less than PG&E. If you do Echo 100, it's about 2% more, but you're guaranteed also that all the power you use comes from renewable sources.
I just want to say I think we're going in a great direction, and staff is doing a good job, as is Republic. I'd like to see us in the coming year look at more opportunities, like fix-it clinics. I know the library is actually doing one. I'm not sure what the date is, but I think that would be good. But let's talk about more ideas and be more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, we're moving on to, no, we're not.
So we thought we'd take an opportunity to talk about a few things. I wanted to bring you and the community up to speed in terms of some issues that have happened most recently at the Corporation Yard. Back on the 18th, we had a pretty significant collapse of a storage building next to the actual offices and facilities, which resulted in then other collapses because everything was tied together. And so it was a surprise. Thankfully, no one was at the yard when this happened, and no one was injured. And so The good news is no one was hurt. The bad news is we are less structures to store things in now. We also had inspection of the remaining storage structures, and I'll walk you through that a little bit, by the building and fire departments. And while they're not immediately red tagging those, they have indicated that they are hopeful that we will start to look seriously at alternatives to eliminate those from use, because they are in a condition that is less than desirable. So this is a few pictures of what happened. So basically you've got on the 18th, where the date was the initial collapse, which then was cleaned up, and you see in the very bottom where it says today, and that is the cleaned site. So one of the interesting things here is that we had to remove the concrete walkway that's there, which deliveries go to and our staff go to, so we'll have to be pouring some concrete slab and sidewalk to get to there, so we have disabled access and access for our folks to access there. So just a little bit of work we have to do. Beyond that, we're looking at, this is the main structure that it remains on the site. From cursory look, it looks pretty good. When you look at it from inside, this is the wonderful fiberglass roofing and siding here. Not exactly weatherproof. And then if you go on the back side, that's where you don't want to really go and see what that looks like. And these were built for the nursery. They were certainly built many years ago for a different purpose in mind, and we've been able to utilize those and deal with it on this site, and thankfully. But our equipment, as noted here, our equipment and our materials are, for the most part, sitting outside, and whether they're in that building or not, they're basically sitting outside in the fog, salt air, salt fog, and everything else. And beyond that, we are then forced to look at the container city that we have there and try to deal with storage within those. And if you've ever used those, they're great for some purposes, but they're difficult because they're of a one-size-fits-all width and size, and they don't necessarily accommodate equipment and storage and parking of vehicles and things of that nature. So those are some of the challenges we're faced with. So we are beginning the evaluation process to look at what our needs are, what is the best practices around the area for corp yards, for inside facilities, storage, all of those things. And I don't think that many people are aware that we have actually a piece of the sand plant is still the city's, which is a part of our indoor facility there, and we're able to fabricate there, and it's a shop. And without that, I don't know what we'd be doing, but I know that Sam would also like to have that area, and so if we could look at consolidating, and that forces us to send people to the SAM facility to do work at times and separate from the rest of the facilities. So in any event, we're also at this point looking at the number 3 one, which is what can we do, and are we willing to make how significant improvements are we willing to make on leasehold land that we currently occupy. So anyway, just wanted to let you know what had happened, what's going on, and what we're looking at for the future for the Corporation Yard.
Don, do you think we'll get through the winter, the rainy season?
I know we'll make it through the rainy season.
All right.
Whether we have a building or not.
All right.
I just wanted to point out, so, the city's been talking about what to do about a corp yard for as long as I've lived here, about 30 years. It's like nobody wants to spend money on a corp yard. It's like when you can spend money on parks and all those fun things, nobody wants to spend money on a corp yard. So it's time to have that tough love discussion. Yeah.
Okay, Maz.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, public. I'm going to keep this brief. I have an update on our wastewater collection system. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the status of our system. What the question is, well, how is it? What is the status of it? And what is our benchmark? We'll talk a little bit about the guidelines from the State Water Resource Control Board. And overall, just how are we doing? And the answer is we're doing well and we're showing improvement, but we'll go in a little bit more detail. All right, the sewer system master plan, this is more on the benchmark side. This is also known as an SSMP. This basically describes the activities of our maintenance of our wastewater treatment system. It establishes a model of our system, and it helps to create accounting. There's a few items listed here. I'm not going to read them out loud, but fog inspections, the capacity of the system, public outreach, among others. Wastewater system management. This is a citywide. We have a couple of different items that we've been doing. We've done a citywide CCTV from the years past, and it yielded a few critical pipeline issues. We've looked at our pump stations. We have a working hydraulic model and a master plan showing the capacity needs. And we are updating this SSMP regularly so that we can keep up with the requirement and the mitigations.
Miles, could you do me a favor and with each acronym explain what it is? For instance, System 1 CCTV.
Absolutely. CCTV is closed circuit television. So basically it's a video recording of our main lines, our sewer main lines.
And SSMP?
The SSMP is this, I'm sorry. That is the sewer system management plan.
Thank you.
Sorry, we lost the PowerPoint. I can continue. We don't have any pictures. It's okay. Talking a little bit about a little bit different of what we've been doing this year is the oversight with the Mark Thomas Company. We've contracted with them to provide a little bit of oversight and review and training of our overall system. And what they've been really helpful in doing is helping with the record keeping. As we all know, it's very important to keep documents and records in case of any SSO events, because a lot of that will have...
SSO.
SSO stands for sewer spill, sorry, thank you, sanitary sewer overflow. Apologies. There's a lot of acronyms. That's good there. So the Mark Thomas contract, so they've been helping with the record keeping. They've been working with our Coastside County Sewer Authority, SAM, crews, and providing support and training throughout the process. We're working on going out with a robust program to proactively tackle the FOG, which stands for fats, oils, and greases, which is a big part of the challenge of a sewer system maintenance. Is when you get those fat, oils, and greases, actually clogs up the system quite a bit. And assisting with the ongoing monitoring and measurement of our overall system. Some of the upcoming activities for improvements, we have a robust CIP, capital improvement program, that looks at a number of areas of concern. We have a point repair project that we're currently working on in different locations throughout the city to help with the pipes that have actually disconnected and have pulled apart over the years. We are doing the closed circuit televisioning of hotspot areas to take a closer look at some of those critical spots. We're going out with a smoke testing RFP, and the smoke testing, what it does is it helps identify areas of water intrusion and infiltration into our system, and there'll be more information coming out on that in the future. The FOG notices, the fat, oil, and grease notices I mentioned, going out to the commercial businesses. And we also have a couple of projects at our pump stations, the Pelican Point and the Ocean Colony pump stations, to increase reliability and efficiency. And with that, I just want to mention, overall, the system is in great shape, and it's showing some promising improvement. And as long as we keep moving and working forward towards that, we'll be able to maintain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Council, any questions?
How is the relationship between Mark Thomas and the SAM maintenance workers going?
Both staff are being very professional, and overall, we've had a couple of monthly coordination meetings. We had a kickoff and a 1-month catch-up from those meetings. It's been going well, and I do have to thank both staff on both sides for coming together and working together, even though it's under some difficult circumstances.
Good evening. I have a few updates to provide to the council and the community. On October 4th, city staff participated in a workday at Oak Park. We painted, we planted, we made all kinds of improvements with the garden and things like that, and it was a great opportunity for staff to get out into the community and make improvements. We had residents kind of walking past us throughout the day that were very appreciative. We're hopeful that we can do this quarterly, perhaps. Staff really enjoyed it, and we have a ton of parks and city facilities that we could do this for. And a special thanks to our Public Works maintenance staff. They kind of organized the day and made sure that we had all the tools and everyone had jobs to do and things like that. So it was a really great day, and staff in the community appreciated it a lot, and we're happy that we were able to do that. Next, as a follow-up to our most recent adoption of our districting ordinance, we did receive the demand letter from the attorney who served the city with a notice of violation. That was received on October 5th. Our city attorney is corresponding with him to request backup documentation for the charges. We do have a deadline to pay per the elections code of November 19th, so we will be issuing a $30,000 check under the city manager's signing authority. And the city attorney is also seeking a release of all claims. So I wanted to just give you guys an update on the closure of that process. More information generally for the public, not specifically city related, but the Secretary of State has just suspended the motor voter program with the DMV. They have found about 25,000 voter registrations that had errors. 542 were in San Mateo County. Those have all been corrected, but until the DMV can do a comprehensive review and a third-party review, the Secretary of State has suspended that program. And lastly, one last council meeting plug for the city's Elections Night Out event coming up on October 30th. Hopefully you receive your ballots before then, and you can come and drop them off and enjoy a dinner with your neighbors. Please bring the family. We'll have the county here with voter registration information, as well as some voting coloring books for kids, and different city staff will be here showcasing some of the projects that we're working on, so it should be a real nice event.
That's going to be here at Ted Ed Cup.
Yes, from 5 to 8 on the 30th. That's all I have.
I just want to say it would be great for the council to join city staff on a work day or some other volunteer event, whatever it is, but invite us next time.
Yeah.
All right.
I'd love it.
Yeah.
Is that it for city manager updates? Okay, we're going to move on to public forum, and I have 4 cards. If there's anybody else who wants to fill out a blue card, please do so and bring it over here. Our first speaker is Carrie Burke. I'm sorry? For 2A. Oh, I apologize. Our first speaker is Jothan Stein.
Hi, I'm Jotham Stein. I live at 534 Alsace-Lorraine, and I spoke to the council about 2 weeks ago with respect to the breach of contract that the Seahorse Ranch is visiting upon our city. And I'm here to report that on Saturday and Sunday at the crossing between Miramonte's, what would be the Miramonte Street if it went all the way down to the beach and the coastal trail, there was horse manure, feces, horse crap, shit, whatever you want to call it, on the beach starting at 5 o'clock when I went running. When I got back, it was still there. It was there on Sunday, and there are remains there today. I went running about 2 hours ago. Some of it was obviously kicked probably by citizens of this city, as well as many of the visitors we have. But I'm not here right now to talk about the breach of contract. I addressed the council 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure you could remember, I hope, anyway. Today, I want to raise a different issue, which is the public policy issue, the bigger issue. Why are there horses on the beach in the first place in a city that has 12,000, 14,000, 16,000 residents and invites tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people over the hill to visit its beaches, surely in the summer? And that would be a question that the council should really ask itself. Given the number of people that live in this area, given the use of people that are walking and sitting and playing on the beach, the children on the beach, why are you allowing hundreds and hundreds of pounds of horse crap and horse manure to be delivered on the beach? That question breaks down into a number of sub-policy questions. One is, should there be commercial use of the beach? So when you have commercial use of the beach, you have horses going on the beach and crapping over and over again, as distinct from personal use on the beach. You can fix this problem by passing an ordinance, doing the review that the council has to do, and then passing an ordinance won't cost you anything to pass the ordinance. It might cost you something to enforce it, but that's one issue. Should there be commercial use as distinct from personal use? A separate corollary public policy issue is, if you were going to allow horses on the beach, where would you allow them? In other words, why are they running on the beach and polluting the beach from Kelly Avenue, or just shy of Kelly Avenue, to Miramontes Avenue, all the way up to Seymour Street, the end of, if you will, Poplar Street? Why are they not doing what they were doing until the winter rains of 2016? They would go down Poplar Beach, go a little circle around Poplar Beach, and come back up. Again, there's a distinction between the commercial use and the personal use of this beach. So those are issues that this council I would urge to take up in addition to and separate from the repeated breach of contract that Seahorse Ranch is currently visiting on our city. Thank you very much, council, for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Mr. Stein, and I can assure you the council will be taking it up very shortly. Sarah Polgar.
Good evening, council members. My name is Sarah Polgar. I live at 352 Poplar Street. My comments tonight also address the horse usage and the significant negative impacts on our communities, coastal habitats, coastal public access, and quality of beach recreation caused by this high level of commercial horse trips by Seahorse Ranch along the coast and on the beaches. And I want to point out, I'm speaking primarily as a concerned Poplar Street resident, but also as a professional with relevant experience in coastal ecosystems and coastal public access. And I also want to note that my comments are specific to the commercial horse traffic, which is orders of magnitude greater than the usage by members of the public who bring their horses and access the beach for trips like that. I support this latter type of horse access. It's not that, it's the commercial access that's that level of usage that's the problem. So by my estimates, you know, on most weekend days, Seahorse Ranch leads more than 80 horse trips from Seahorse Ranch along down to Poplar Beach. They travel on Poplar Beach and then back up the same way. And I have, at this scale of operation, you know, Seahorse Ranch horses are adding a huge amount of horse waste directly to our creek, coastal bluffs, and beaches along where they travel. I've also witnessed over the past 10 years how this level of horse traffic has drastically accelerated the erosion and degradation of the public coastal access points at Poplar Beach and further north, where they come back up. These just can't handle that horse usage. Also, I see so many visitors to Poplar Beach spreading their blankets on top of old horse droppings, and families. They have kids playing in sand mixed with poop with old droppings. I've pointed it out to people, and most of them didn't realize it was horse droppings, and they are horrified when they realize. So in response to my concerns about horse waste, I've been told, oh, horse waste doesn't pose a risk to the environment or human health. Actually, there's no getting around the fact that horse manure is fecal matter, and fecal matter is essentially concentrated nutrients with high levels of bacteria. So it's true, horse manure or horse waste, this fecal matter, might be less harmful than other types in terms of bacteria, harmful bacteria, but anytime excess fecal matter is added to an aquatic habitat, it creates conditions that are harmful to ecological functions and our health. So most people know about the harmful bacteria. They probably aren't as aware that it's just as bad to add excess nutrients to an aquatic environment. It has a cascading effect that contributes to algal blooms like red tides, which cause high levels of toxins that are concentrated in shellfish. And then when the algal blooms die, they decompose and they reduce oxygen levels, which make it harder for all the fish and critters to survive in the ocean. So we definitely have red tides. We see the signs for no shellfish collection, et cetera. And there's really no way to know what proportion of this problem would be due to the fecal matter from the seahorse ranch horses, but it's safe to conclude that the nutrients and bacteria in the horse, is it all right if I continue? Okay. And the horse and fecal matter from the seahorse ranches are deposited in the creek and the beaches, and they're reaching the ocean. That's a lot of horse waste entering our ocean and polluting it. I'm asking the City Council to terminate or provide notice of non-renewal of the Seahorse Ranch license now, effective at the end of the license's current term, December 31st, 2020. So this would prevent the license from automatically renewing, because if the City Council doesn't do this, it automatically renews for another 5 years. So at the very least, the City Council should terminate or non-renew the license when it expires, so that the city can renegotiate the license to achieve better, more favorable terms for the city and our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next speaker is Joaquin Jimenez.
Good evening. Let's see. Where should I start? About 3 weeks ago, there was an article in the paper, and there was a quote from someone that actually is running for city council. And we find it very offensive here in the community. I'm going to quote what says on the paper. I wasn't there that day, and I haven't heard the video. It was actually the way it was said. It says, the one thing you don't want to do with affordable housing is to just be for low income. It tends to be ghettos and slums. That, to me, is ignorance and prejudice. I don't know if she knows, but a family of four with an income of $117,000 a year is considered to be low income. I know a lot of families that live way below the low income. And maybe she's ignorant about our community. The housing on Main Street, it was opened in the mid-90s, and I don't think it looks like a ghetto or slums. Moonridge housing, low-income housing, farm housing, opened up in '99, and I don't think it looks like slums or ghettos. The senior housing we recently opened is low income, does not look like ghettos or slums. So what I'm trying to say is, Virginia, we don't want you in city council. Your comment was ignorant, and you pretty much offended large amount of the members of the community by making this statement. Like I said, I was not there. I don't know the rest of the story, but I read the paper, and it's very clear, quoted by her. So if we have people like this running for city council, it's just not any better than an incident I had a few days ago. In the early mornings, I had to go for a bike ride, get my coffee, walking down the street with my coffee in one hand, my bike on the other hand. person comes out of the house, points the finger at me, and says, "You Mexicans stole my bike." So this is what I have to deal with, you know. So now a person, there's going to be an official, is running for official position in Half Moon Bay, making statements like this. I don't know. Are we moving, we're paddling backwards? You know, maybe she needs to do a little more education, a little more study about Half Moon Bay. We love our community. We don't have no ghettos, we don't have no slums. That's for sure. And the people that live in those houses and those homes and those, you know, projects, as she wants to call them, they know more about community than she does because they care for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin.
Joaquin, I agree with you 100%.
Okay, we're moving on to the consent calendar. Anything want to be pulled, or are we, can I get a motion?
Debbie reads it really well.
I move that we adopt the consent calendar. Items 1A, waive reading of resolutions and ordinances. Item 1B, warrants for the month of August 2018. Item 1C, ordinance adding Chapter 7.50, regulating smoking in certain places, and Chapter 7.60, regulating sale of tobacco products, to the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code, second reading. Item 1D, quarterly financial report for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2017-2018. Item 1E, treasurer's report for the quarter ending June 30, 2018. Item 1F, response to the San Mateo County Grand Jury Report, cooperative purchasing, a roadmap to more effective city procurement. Item 1G, response to the San Mateo County Grand Jury Report, soaring pension costs, time for hard choices for San Mateo County cities. Item 1H, budget amendment for fiscal year 2018-2019, Citizens Option for Public Safety Grant Program.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda passes. We're moving on to ordinances and public hearings, and we're going to start with local coastal land use plan amendment to establish the Stolowski-Gonzalez Plan Development District, PDP 18-068.
Good evening again. And the item before you, as you said, is an amendment to the local coastal land use plan. And the focus of the presentation will be to give you some background on this and then overview the proposed amendment and review the recommendation, which includes another whereas clause that we'd like to suggest for the resolution, should you wish to proceed with that. So to begin, we'll start with an overview of the Stolowski-Gonzalez property. There's quite a bit of backstory, and I'll try to click through it pretty quickly. And if you would like me to stop and get into more detail, I'm happy to do that. But this item has been vetted quite a bit with the Planning Commission, and I think the staff report included a lot of the background documentation that we provided to them, so I hope that was helpful. This started in 2010 with an application for a coastal development permit, a tentative subdivision map, plan development plan, and a use permit to subdivide about a 2-acre property at the north end of the Surf Beach, Dunes Beach PD. It's a 4-lot subdivision. The application marched through the city process. In 2011, the Planning Commission reviewed it and recommended approval to the City Council. In 2012, City Council approved it. At that point, there was an appeal of the city's decision, and the Coastal Commission considered it in the appeal in 2014 and found no substantive issue, and thus the city's council's approval of the subdivision and the related entitlements stood. And in 2015, the city...
Jill?
Yes.
The 2014 Coastal Commission decision, what did the staff of the Coastal Commission recommend for that? Do you remember?
Yeah, we can... The staff did not recommend no substantive issue. They recommended that the Coastal Commission take up the matter, that there were substantive issues, in fact, that there were several. But one in particular was policy, and we'll get into that in just a minute, but specifically with regards to how the city processes plan developments and the requirement in our local coastal land use plan for planning plan developments as a whole. And in this particular PD, the requirement for doing that would be preparation of a specific plan for the entire plan development area. And so that was staff's position, was that the city should have done that. And in the next slide, we'll have a map, and it will, we can just go there now. So that folks can see where this is all setting right now. The red boundary is the existing Surf Beach, Dunes Beach plan development area. It's about 50 acres. At the north end of the PD is the Stolowski-Gonzalez parcel. It's outlined in green. And it is very definitely in our local coastal land use plan, that parcel is described as being located within this plan development through just the way the boundaries are described and the acreage matches, et cetera, We did a lot of research to confirm that that was true and looked at old subdivision maps. So let me finish with what was entitled back up to 2015, and then we'll take it up to where the Planning Commission really got involved over the summer. So the subdivision that was approved for 4 lots is shown here. You can see there's lots 1 and 2 could be accessed from an extension of Pullman Avenue with a cul-de-sac terminating into those lots. Similarly with lots 3 and 4, Champs-Élysées Boulevard would be extended and have a cul-de-sac there. In fact, those improvements are substantially completed according to the approved parcel map. The infrastructure has been constructed per the final map approval. The rest of the entitlements included a plan development plan. It's one of the attachments to your report, and it's a page, and it is meant to cover the basic zoning standards for this subdivision, and was treated as akin to what might have been a specific plan. Could the area have been planned separately from the rest of the PD, which was an assumption that was made through the processing. And so it lists the basic things you see in a zoning code: permitted uses, prohibited uses, heights, setbacks, open space requirements, etc. There's one more detail that we think is very important. There was a legal challenge towards the end of this whole process from a neighbor adjacent to the most western parcel. And the neighbor and the subdivider and the city entered into a settlement agreement. And the settlement agreement is also included as an attachment to your staff report, and is pertinent to what you're going to be considering in terms of the amendment to the local coastal land use plan, because this was really a sort of an expansion of what the entitlements included. It changed some of the approval. For example, a culvert had been included in the original plan, and that was taken out because of this. A sewer line alignment was established by the settlement agreement. Tree protection measures and replacements were outlined similarly to what your heritage tree ordinance requires, but they were a little bit stricter. And there was this further restriction area that is shown on this map here, where no development was to occur for at least 10 years. So let's catch up, and this is where I'm going to get a bit more into the nuts and bolts of this. So that subdivision's done. It's all done, and that plan development plan is approved. And we have property owners of these lots who are preparing to build houses on them, which is what they were established for. They're lots for single-family homes. And so we received one application at the end of 2017 and another at the end of 2018 for the two homes that would be on the Champs-Élysées cul-de-sac. They applied for the typical permits that we would require, coastal development permit and architectural review. And I always take these to the Planning Commission when we have consideration of new large development of this scale. And so the process was to, in working with the city, to prepare complete applications. The applicants got feedback, they revised their plans, very typical process. And they both happened to be ready at about the same time. And we thought it was actually in the public interest to take them to the Planning Commission, at least start their review process on the same night for that context. And so we did that. And the Planning Commission took a look at this on August 14th, and they held public hearings for both items and continued them both to a date uncertain, citing concern with not being able to make all of the findings necessary for approving a coastal development permit. And one of the key things in approving a coastal development permit is the development needs to be found to be consistent with all of the policies of the coastal land use plan. And what the Planning Commission noted was, well, gee, no specific plan had been prepared for the Surf Beach, Dunes Beach plan development area within which this parcel is located. And we can't make a finding based on that. And there were several other policies that we cited and we've assessed with the Planning Commission for their consideration, but that's really the key one. So the Commission asked us to, first of all, it's kind of this is unusual. This is a one-off. We don't have any other condition like this in town that I'm aware of. I would be very surprised if it ever happened again. It shouldn't, because our policies tell us how to do this. I think people were, I don't know how it happened, honestly. The record is all there. We went through the whole thing, and people made findings, and they tried to do a great job reviewing the development, and unfortunately, this part of it just wasn't consistent. So that's what the Commission asked us to do, show us the history and present some options so that we understand what we can do. So we did that on August 28th. We came right back. This is a lot of effort was made to review all of this, and I want to credit Catherine and her staff, Heather Minner in particular. Heather and I spent quite a bit of time trying to suss this out, and we also met with the applicants for the homes, and that was very helpful to get some more background from them as well, and we got calls from public as well. So we've had a lot of input on this, and I think the record fleshed out pretty well for us to understand it. So the Planning Commission reviewed the backstory, of which I've shared some highlights, and they directed, we posed a few different options, including the one that we recommended and they agreed, which was to initiate an amendment to the local coastal land use plan to establish a separate plan development for the Stolowski-Gonzalez subdivision, just simply to conform it to what had been approved, conform it to the parcel map that was approved, conform to that plan development plan, and to also acknowledge the settlement agreement that the city was a party to. So we worked on that, and we've also been working with our Coastal Commission colleagues on this because this is very pertinent to the Coastal Commission. This decision, whatever you decide to do tonight, if you forward an amendment, it will, if you approve it, it will go on to the Coastal Commission. This is any amendment to the local coastal land use plan needs to be ultimately approved by them. So we wanted to make sure that staff was in the loop, and of course they know the backstory on it too, and they were part of our work in terms of researching. They were very helpful. On September 25th, there was a duly noticed public hearing with the Planning Commission to consider the amendment. The language, just as it is provided to you tonight, the amendment would establish it's a pretty short local coastal land use plan amendment for establishing a PD. It's Exhibit A of your resolution. And in a nutshell, it would establish this separate planned development district. It would be specifically coterminous with the final map that was approved for that Stolowski subdivision, and it would be completely severed from the Surf Beach Dunes Beach planned development district. The policies, you'll notice that there are 3 policies for this new plan development, and they're really specific to the entitlements that were already granted. The final parcel map, the plan development plan, and then also the settlement agreement. And the only other change was to address Surf Beach Dunes Beach to be clear that its border needed to be amended and its acreage needed to be reduced. So you'll see amendments there showing a Surf Beach Dunes Beach PD area with 48 acres and the boundary line set a little bit to the south, as you see in this graphic here. So this is the map of the proposed amendment, the 2 separate side-by-side PDs. So in summary, the scope of the action covers only the 4 lots that were already created through the subdivision. We want to be clear that in terms of development standards, the previously approved PUD development standards, they are substantially similar to residential zoning standards that we have in other zoning districts. They're really not extraordinary in any way from those. There's a few specific things about limiting footprints because the lots are especially large. So a few things like that. It maintains the integrity of the Surf Beach Dunes Beach PD. The action does not grant approval to develop within that PD, and in fact is really specifically being clear that we don't sever pieces off of that PD or any other PD by correcting it in this way. This is a conservative approach to really cleaning it up and making everything consistent all the way through from policy to implementation in advance of considering decisions on allowing the development to go forth on those individual lots. I want to note again the public notice that was done. So there's been, even at the initiation meeting that we had back at the end of August, we put out some e-news information we posted on Nextdoor. Of course, the Planning Commission's recommendation meeting was a fully noticed public hearing with a newspaper ad. The site was posted all over and all the things we're supposed to do, and that was done again for you for this meeting tonight. We do note that one of the key things here was concern about precedence, and that by continuing to process applications for these particular properties where specific findings could not be made in the LUP, that was the key concern of the Planning Commission, and staff is fully supportive of their desire to not leave that sitting in that way. And so we wanted to, getting to this recommendation, we hope you'll do this because we think it's the right thing to do. But we would like to add a whereas clause to the recommended resolution to really overtly note that we're recognizing that this is a unique situation, and the intent is to conform the policy to areas that have already been planned and really entitled, and that this unique situation should not be construed as precedents for future projects in terms of how we would address a PD and possibly consider dividing it. That would require a full-blown land use plan amendment that is a lot more, CEQA coverage and all kinds of other things. This is work that had already had CEQA review. It's all hanging on what was already entitled and approved. So we hope that is reassuring, and of course we have our recommended motion, and I've got definitely, if you have clarifying questions, we're sure there's some public comment for the public hearing. And of course, the next steps will be to take this to the Coastal Commission. I've got backup slides on specific policies if you need to dig into those. I'm not going to present them. They're really dense, but it's here. So should you need it, just let me know. Thank you.
I think we'll go to public forum before the City Council. So Carrie Burke. I'm opening public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor Penrose, members of the council. I'm Carrie Burke on behalf of the Skolowski Gonzalez families. And I'd first like to thank the Deputy City Attorney and our Planning Director for all their work on this very unique and distinct property. And Jill really did do a good job of describing. It's just a 2-acre parcel with now has a map of 4 recorded legal parcels for residential development. The Planning Commission unanimously supported staff's work on this for this amendment. The landowners support it, and they also, and the new whereas clause. So hopefully this can quickly move on to the City Council and then resolve this matter. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Carrie. Council. Closing public hearing.
I want to thank you, Jill, for all the hard work. From my perspective, this is cleaning up a real mess that should never have occurred in the first place, but it occurred. And I also appreciate your effort to make sure that this severing of the 2 PDs is not a precedent that we'd like to continue. It's something that we had to do in order to do the right thing for this previously approved subdivision. So under the circumstances, it's about as good as we can do. It's clear to me that the city will continue to enforce its LCP and that any PUD will require a specific plan. In particular, the Dunes Beach Surf Beach will have to have an approved specific plan before any development can occur. So I'm in favor of the resolution as amended, and I congratulate you for doing all this hard work, and our legal team too.
I just want to reiterate what Harvey said. Excellent, excellent staff work, both from legal counsel and from community development staff. Thanks much.
So, yeah, to me, this is a travesty, really, in the scheme of things. This goes against everything we stand for on council. It goes against all policy we've ever set. It goes against all rules that we've ever had. And to me, I mean, in my world, this is a harpa and a shanda, which basically means like, this is wrong. We all know it. I mean, everybody that's come up and talked about it knows it. And it's a problem. I am still in favor of approving it. I appreciate the work you've done with it. I am sad that we are in this situation. It goes against what I stand for, being up here to vote for it, but yet I'm going to do so because I think we've done the best we can with it. But we should, this is I agree with, very much so with the Planning Commission that this is a precedent that is extremely, it's something that we want to very much make sure does not ever happen again, nor should it. And this is a slippery slope, and I hope that none of us ever have to talk about this ever again in any other way, shape, or form on council, because this is not the way that business should be done. So.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Catherine, for your hard work. Can I have a motion?
Call up the amended motion.
It's right here.
Is that it?
That's the extra whereas clause, so you could, your motion
I think it was the previous, yeah.
is here, and we just want to make sure you add this language to it.
Okay.
Okay. So I can flip it back.
I move that we adopt a resolution as amended approving an amendment to the Half Moon Bay Local Coastal Land Use Plan to establish the Stolowski-Gonzalez Plan Development District. The resolution is amended to add, whereas the City Council recognizes the Stolowski-Gonzalez subdivision area has already been planned with an approved final parcel map and planned unit development plan, and that this is a unique situation and shall not be construed as precedents for future projects.
Second.
I'd like a roll call on this.
Councilmember Eisen? Yes. Councilmember Reddick? Yes. Vice Mayor Rohrbach?
Yes.
Mayor Penrose?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We're moving on to a discussion of the funding for Highway 1 median improvements south of Kelly Avenue.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. I'm glad to be before you. What I have for you tonight is a proposed project that's in its early planning stages and work that the Coastside Chamber of Commerce has done, and wanted to talk about a potential contribution and ultimately take over the project by the city if you so are inclined. Looks like we just lost. Do you have the presentation shown on yours? Okay. Okay, so. Do I have control of the? I have no control. There's nothing. Oh, it's just not changing on mine. What slide? Can I come to join you, Adam? Okay. Can we go to the background slide? Oh. Thank you, Dave. Okay, so by way of background, in 2008, when the Highway 92 widening project was completed, several areas were planted around Main Street, the center medians, for beautification purposes as well as drainage purposes. And that was part of that design project. In 2011, similar improvements were installed along Highway 1 from Main Street down to the Kelly Avenue intersection. And all of this is depicted in the photograph here by the areas with the red lines on them. That project in 2011 cost approximately $300,000, which was paid for through chamber fundraising, federal, state, and local grants. When the city takes on these types of projects, they also take on the responsibility for maintenance from Caltrans going forward. And the annual contract maintenance cost for these planted medians are approximately $25,000 per year. Everybody's seen these, but just to demonstrate the improvements, these are the original improvements along Highway 92. We have improvements along the stretch of highway between Highway 1, between Main Street and Highway 92. And then south on Highway 1 from 92 down to Kelly Avenue. And then here's the intersection at Kelly Avenue looking south. And as you can see, there are landscape improvements right at the end of the median there, but then the strip continues for another 500 feet south, and it's just grass and turf, and not the same sort of visual impact that you get from the plantings that are in place throughout the rest of the city. So this is something that the Chamber of Commerce has been looking at for a long time. They've done some fundraising, and the proposed project would be an additional 500 feet to finish the southbound portion of the highway median improvements. The estimated project cost would be $130,000. The Chamber currently has raised approximately $20,000 towards this project. We're looking at a potential contribution by the city of $80,000, which would leave approximately $30,000 that the Chamber believes if we have $100,000 committed to the project, the $30,000 could be raised through additional fundraising and grants, with the leverage of most of the project being funded at that point. This is just a depiction of what the Chamber's been using for their marketing materials. As you can see, they'd be native plants bunched and would create a nice visual impact as you head into town from the south, or leave town heading south, and would have the same sort of visual and drainage impacts that the rest of the work is done for the city. And I can say from my standpoint, having grown up here and seen the iterations of the highway, those plantings really did make a big impact on how the highways look as you come in and out of town. If approved, the $80,000 city funding commitment we propose would come from a line item in our capital improvement project budget that's called the Annual Capital Community Enhancement Project. $50,000 per year is allocated for the council to allocate towards a project that enhances the community. There weren't any projects proposed last year, and so we carried over $30,000 from last year's funding, and then an additional $50,000 from this year. We currently don't have any other proposals for this funding for this fiscal year. The Chamber would continue to work on the design, which would be in accordance with the work that's already been done, and they'd provide that to the city. At that point, the city, once the funds are all raised, the city would actually take over the project. It would be a public work. We would have to go out for competitive bid, and we would manage the completion of the project, and then we would be responsible for ongoing maintenance. And the expectation is it would just be an addition to the ongoing contract we have, and it'd be a small incremental increase to maintain this additional stretch. So the recommendation, if the council is in favor of this type of project, would be to adopt a resolution designating this project as our City Council Community Enhancement Project for fiscals years 17-18 and 18-19. And the funds, which again are already allocated in the budget, would be attributed to this project. And once the remaining funds have been either fundraised or collected through a grant, we would come back to the City Council with the actual project for your final approval. If you have any questions.
Council, any questions? Can I have a motion? Sorry, sure.
I'd like to move that we adopt a resolution designating the median landscape improvements on Highway 1, south of Kelly Avenue, as the City Council Community Enhancement Project for fiscal years 17-18 and 18-19, and to allocate a total of $80,000, $30,000 from fiscal year 17-18 and $50,000 from fiscal year 18-19 toward construction of the project.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. We're moving on to street sign replacement project. Thank you, Matthew.
Mayor, council members, when's the last time I came up here with props? Never. This is fun tonight. So, as part of your operations budget approval, you included funding to start the process of replacing city street identification signs. What we're looking at today is a series of signs that look much like this. This is the one of the wave crest signs. What you can see is it's been weathered, and it was also, most of our signs have been developed prior to new regulations requiring reflectivity that's different. And so you can see with this one, frankly, there's absolutely no reflectivity. And if you look out at virtually all the street signs around that are out there, in the nighttime, you can't see your street signs. And it's pretty dark out there because the community wishes to have pretty light, free skies, so dark skies. And so the combination creates some challenges and issues for that. Now, over the years, we have evolved a little bit, and some of these signs have been replaced, and the reflectivity is a little better. This is my favorite sign, of course, for St. John's, but anyway, my staff provided that, but anyway, that wasn't my ideal. But you can see here, and in fact, some of our signs actually have the black and white seal on them, but again, this does not meet our current requirements for reflectivity. And and this really doesn't do much justice to the world, we don't think. So, in part of our conversations about what do we do and how do we deal with this, we thought that it made sense to at least talk to you and the community about using our street signs as a way of, one, establishing our community and our community values, as well as establishing a form of branding that comes with that. So our first run at this was the idea of our current green signs, but with the city seal in color. And we think this really is pretty nifty, and it's in your, it's the start of this here. Up here, I went the wrong way, but we'll go to the greens. So again, part of this, these are samples. They're not full size. You can see these are slightly smaller. They were just put together for that, and going with this. But this was one concept that was put out by staff and part of your package, and dealing with that. We also looked at this in the presentation-wise. You can see this with also the wave, but this is your basically standard green look. We have. And yes, I'll give you my opinion. This is really cool. We like the blue. I like the blue. It features the wave logo and really speaks, I think, to the community. One of the things I really like about the blue, regardless of what is used there, it distinguishes us from the county. The county uses green signs. It's very difficult around here sometimes to figure out what's city, what's county, and just simply changing the color of the signs would help to define and identify those communities and where they are, deal with that. So this is this. As you note in the handout, the presentation, you can see we can modify the poplar, make it bigger, make the streets smaller. We can do any number of things and follow much like what is with this one where the avenue is smaller and the sign. So we can do any number of things with this. But you can see in this sign, this is the actual reflectivity, what's required today. It's built in and it'll last for a long time and won't wear out as quickly as some of the others, but they do wear out. So that's the concepts for the city as a whole that we would like to have you think about, talk about. What I'll do is I'll put these and people can see them a little bit of both ways on that. So that being said, we also started to think about what do we see in a lot of communities? And what we see in a lot of communities is that they approach their main street, their downtowns, their historic downtowns a little differently, and with their historic structures and things, and they sometimes identify those distinctly and differently. So what we thought about was what are kind of commonplace, kind of the historic kind of ideas and everything with that deal. And historically, street signs have been black and white. In a lot of old towns and downtowns, and you see them around and dealing with that. So one of the ideas that we had was to look at black and white. So you can see that as a white background and black, or you can go to black with the white. And what we were contemplating in that was the idea of at least Main Street. In the Main Street downtown area, we could extend to San Benito, to Johnston, to Church, and take that block area and designate it and kind of identify it as unique and separate. Now what our staff put together was also these ideas that beyond just this is that you can do some additional benefits and what's going on here? There we go. To looking at adding to the tops of those. These are just concepts, but the wave in a black and white, the half moon, any number of things. If you ever go into Cannery Row area, you'll see these black and white signs, and they have actually the great white shark up on the top of theirs, and that identifies sort of the Cannery Row area. So that was sort of the thought process going with this, is how do we uniquely identify our community. We looked at and thought about the pumpkin idea, but we know some folks see that as a very short term and not necessarily the long term, year by year and 365-day kind of approach to this. So that in a nutshell is what we, yeah. Yes. So that takes the logo, the wave logo, and just makes it black and white and puts it on the top of that. Yeah. So that's again, these are concepts and ideas that staff have put out and sort of, frankly, the options are somewhat endless, but we had to stop somewhere in the mix and kind of look at how we approach these. So in a nutshell, we're going to start to replace, we have to start replacing our street signs. We would like to get your input and ultimately, if you feel comfortable enough, direction in terms of which options you would like to go. As we indicated in the staff report, if you're uncomfortable tonight doing this, we could certainly get this out to the community. We could do a vote, we could do a survey, we can do any number of things that could allow the community input. We could put these up and out somewhere so people could at least see them and they could mark on a sheet, or we could do any number of things out there. And we understand that this is a pretty big shift from pretty plain Jane green and white. But again, as we look at replacing virtually all of these signs down the road and dealing with it, our thought was, let's do it the right way, put up what we really want as a community, and move forward with that. And again, the Main Street, and I'll flip it around so you can see the black and the white on there, doesn't have to be done, but was just a concept that we put out there to say, how do we look at that? One of the ideas that was put out there, I'll throw one, was that we perhaps put the topper of some kind on the signs that are streets leading to the beach. So you would have even a better idea of which, Kelly and Poplar and some of the other streets that you would put those there, and that would be an indicator of the beach access that would be subtle, but there. So again, those can be integrated in as we move along and kind of go forward. So I'll shut up and let you talk.
Have we looked at other typefaces?
We can look at any number.
This is very disturbing to me as an artist. Maine looks like it's been squished together because of the I.
Yeah.
And then street looks like it's stretched out. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so let's
So there are different typefaces that won't do that.
we can certainly look at the typefaces, and I apologize. Again, what we're really seeing here, for example, on this, is that the name, this is really scrunched and smaller than what it would be. And again, this sign is also smaller than what the normal would be. This is just a sampling of what it, can look like. We, in retrospect, if you look at what we have mainly around, we have Main large and the street as a small ST or as ST next to it, or you've got the wave crest and the road up above it. So these are all out there. We can certainly look at typeface and straight. I will say this, you need to have very plain Jane lettering, although this certainly can be straightforward, but we can't go into it just from people understanding it and seeing it and looking at it in the nighttime, particularly driving and driving at speed or anything with that deal. They need to be fairly blocked, fairly straightforward, deal with it. But a lot of this can be stretched and improved in terms of spacing between letters and so that it reads better.
Yeah.
I honestly would like to see some input from the community. I certainly would like the Main Street Historical Association to review the signs for Main Street and downtown. Why not a high school art class or digital design class creating some ideas? I'd like to generate some ideas from the community. Putting together certain assumptions about minimum requirements, maybe, but unless this is like an urgent matter, I'd like to see some input from the community somehow.
I think that's great, and I love the idea of a high school project.
I would just say this, these are a traffic safety issue. We have to be very careful about what we do and deal with it, so I would be hesitant to go too crazy with that. I think that there are certain things that are sort of appropriate when it comes to your regulatory signage and your street identification signs. And while we've shown you here, you can do the black outline, you can do different shapes and designs in terms of the cutouts and things of that nature. There are some limitations. Staff is certainly open to opening this up to the community and letting their input flow.
I don't think we have to make it terribly complicated. Just a simple, call for ideas. It has to fit on this size of a sign, et cetera, et cetera. Just maybe 5 bullet points. They have to meet all these criteria, submit them by a deadline, and let's take a look and see what we got.
Yep, no problems there.
You think? Great.
I'm ready to go.
I like that.
I like the blue one.
I do like blue, yeah.
I'm ready to go. go. Let's do it. Let's move on. Enough community input. Let's make this happen. Done. That's where I stand.
I agree with Adam about the blue. I really like the blue. I like the logo. You know, this is my 2 cents. I don't know if I have any more aesthetic sense than anybody else here, but for Main Street, I really like the black with the white lettering with the logo on top. And yeah, that sign with the wave, and including the block number, that combination, which that's.
I really think if we're going to do Main Street and we're going to make it different, a different typeface. I like the one where you show the cutout corners. I think that makes it look like an older sign.
Yeah.
But, and I don't know about sticking things on top of it. I don't think historically signs had things on top of them in old main streets. So it depends on what you're looking for.
A lot of New England communities have the things on the top. Yeah.
What do they have on the top?
The little icons that indicate the neighborhood or, you know, the community logo or something. It's not uncommon. Yeah. But it seems like there's not much support for the sort of ideas thing. So maybe downtown, just check in with the Historical Association. I do like the blue. I do like the idea of distinguishing beach access routes from other streets. So I think that's a really good idea. I do agree with Deborah, though, that we have to be careful with typeface.
Another option would be to use green if you're going north-south and use blue if you're going east-west.
Huh?
So streets that run to the ocean are blue. Poplar Street's blue. Kelly Street is blue. Church Street is green.
I will say this, I think that you'll be disappointed in that
Yellow
look.
for the streets.
I like the thought process. I think you'd be disappointed in the look, because you'll have two signs crossing, and one will be green and one will be blue, and it would look a little. What is blue and green turn into? Black.
Did you go to art school or did I, John?
My mother-in-law's an artist, okay? She tells me I have no taste.
Do you need anything more from us?
No, no. I'll plan on bringing back some final renderings with the typeface. I think reevaluated and reassessed.
I think especially for Main Street. Main Street is not a complicated set of words. And a little serif, just a little serif. It doesn't have to be a big serif.
I think we can make Main Street pop in a good way with that. I'm not worried about that.
Okay, thank you, John. I guess we're moving on to item 3C, which is grant writing and legislative advocacy update.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Alex Gibbs from Townsend Public Affairs is here, and he'll provide an update on the 2018 legislative session, as well as the various grant funding opportunities for the city.
Thank you.
Hello, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I would like to say thank you for having me this evening, and if my opinion counts, I'm opting for the blue signs. I'd like to start off, I'm going to be speaking this evening about our 2017-2018 legislative session activities, as well as our grant writing efforts. But first, I'd really like to take this opportunity to thank your fantastic staff. They've been really a pleasure to work with throughout my time here. and especially this last year as we began our legislative advocacy. Specifically, Matthew, John, Jill, Maz, Jennifer, Ray, previously Danielle, and now Jessica, who we're going to be working with. Certainly. All of the grant wins that we have achieved throughout my tenure here with the city certainly would not have been possible without the work of your staff. So thanks to everybody we've worked with throughout this process. I'm going to begin with legislative session activities. I know it's getting late, so I'm going to keep it somewhat brief, but of course open it up to questions throughout my presentation and of course at the end. This year was the last year of the Brown administration. This year saw over 1,200 bills introduced in the regular session that made it to his desk, actually. So upwards of 2,000 bills introduced, over 1,200 made it to the governor's desk, of which he vetoed 201. So just a little bit of numbers for you in terms of everything that was monitored, not necessarily taken a position on, but items that we flagged and raised for your staff. Getting into the priority legislation that we worked on, the City Council took strong positions on environmental protection legislation, especially legislation that had to do with offshore drilling, specifically AB 1775 by Assemblymember Maritsuchi and Senate Bill 834 by Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson. Both of those were state lands leasing oil and gas, and those were somewhat a response to the federal EPA and their goals to increase natural gas production and offshore drilling off the coasts of Florida and California because of some efforts by the governor in Florida. I believe that those plans were shelved on the East Coast, but yet they persisted here on the West Coast and specifically in California. So that was why these bills were introduced. The City Council took an official position, and we lobbied throughout the process in support of those bills, working very closely with the staff of Assemblymember Maritsuchi and Senator Jackson. Ultimately, both of those bills were passed and signed into law by the governor on September 9th. I included in my report his brief signing message, which I will not read, but suffice to say it was certainly sending a message to the federal administration. Those were not the only environmental bills that were passed this last year that the council certainly was supportive of. I know AB 1884, which I'll speak about soon, and SB 100, the De Leon Renewable Energy Bill. I heard us speaking earlier in this council meeting that the city is already on 100% renewable energy, so that's fantastic, and it also shows in Sacramento that the community of Half Moon Bay is very forward-thinking, and you're already doing your part in terms of the state's renewable energy commitments. A big part of our goal here when we were brought on in terms of legislative advocacy was to protect local control within the city. I know obviously in Sacramento lots of legislation gets passed, and very often it's at the city and municipal level that we actually have to deal with the implications of a lot of that legislation. So some of the bills that were introduced that we worked on this year in terms of local control, I've listed in your report. I'll speak briefly on a few of them. AB 1912, specifically by Assemblymember Rodriguez. That was the Public Employees Retirement Bill. That would have put the city on the hook essentially for any JPA that you were a part of retroactively in the past or now for any of those pension expenses, regardless of how large a role you played in that JPA. Ultimately, we know pension costs are a big concern, but it was really the retroactivity clause that was a large concern to us. So we lobbied very heavily in conjunction with the league and other organizations, and ultimately that bill was amended, and it was...
May I ask a question about that one? Sorry to...
Yeah, please.
So when I was reading through that one, I was noticing that it ended up being that only for new JPAs that were formed. That was my understanding.
Yes, that is correct.
So if there's a JPA that exists and then is rewritten, do you know how that comes into play on that? Amended, or is it amended, or would if it were ended and then rewritten, or amended, how does that work? Do you know how that plays out?
Yeah, so my understanding is that it would be only for the creation of a new JPA. Amends to existing JPAs would not be affected, and ultimately that was one of the reasons that I know the California League of Cities ended up removing their opposition from the bill. Ultimately, the bill was extremely watered down, and in fact, it's more really legislative declarations and findings. The amount that you would be on the hook for future costs is really dependent on the amount of work the employees do directed towards your specific portion of that JPA, if you will. SCA 20, the next bill, that was a Senate constitutional amendment by Senator Glazer over in the East Bay. This would have restructured the Bradley Burn sales tax. Currently, online sales tax, as designated by that, it's not the point of sale, I'm sorry, the point of delivery, but it's the point of purchase where those taxes end up. This is one that we worked with your staff on ultimately to determine the net benefit or detriment to the city on this. That was yet to be determined while it was still in the process, so we did not take a support or opposed position on this, but instead monitored it very closely. Due to overwhelming questions and opposition, the bill was shelved. We've been working with the author's office and have been informed that they will be reintroducing this next year under a new administration. So it's one that we have flagged for your attention and one we'll be working with your staff on going forward. Moving to environmental quality, I know that this is a priority issue for the council. Bless you. AB 1884 by Assemblymember Calderon, the single-use plastic straws bill, that did pass, and it is now statewide law. Essentially, it prohibits food facilities from giving out single-use plastic straws to customers unless it's requested, with the exception of fast food facilities. And then moving to SB 100, De Leon, this is the renewable energy. So once again, kudos to the city for already being on 100% renewables. It won't impact your operations, but the bill would increase the requirement for renewable energy to be 50% statewide by 2026, 60% by 2030, and 100% by 2045. Segueing somewhat to funding, Proposition 68, the park bond. This was one that was passed on the June ballot. We've been working very closely with the Department of Parks and Recreation as well as the Natural Resources Agency on these streams of funding. Recently, guidelines have been released and we're currently in the public comment period for some of those grant programs. We're working very closely with your staff to determine what public comment we should be submitting on behalf of the city. I.e. how we can make our projects more competitive, be it removing population thresholds or caps on that benefit largely urban communities versus more rural or smaller communities such as Half Moon Bay. So we had a good meeting on that, and I'll be submitting draft public comment to city staff for approval before we submit anything in Sacramento.
I just want to say I think this one's a priority, getting a piece of Prop 68, don't you think? Yeah.
Certainly, certainly. And that was one of the things that we were speaking about earlier today. The maximum grant award for the statewide park program this year will be $8.5 million per project. So it is a significant funding source as opposed to Prop 84, which was significantly smaller. Also, the amount of dollars available for Prop 84, I believe, for statewide parks was roughly $350 million for all funding rounds. For Prop 68, there are over $650 million alone in statewide park programs. So we certainly are looking to capture significant amounts of those funding, and it really coincides well with the approval of your Parks Master Plan. So the fact that you were able to go out and do community outreach last year, you're already ahead of the game.
So I should know this. So my understanding is Prop 68 doesn't require competitive grant rounds. So they're developing criteria and guidelines, and then I guess it's up to individual agencies as to whether they're going to have solicitations, competitive solicitations. Is that your understanding of it?
Yes, that is correct. Ultimately, some grant programs were reauthorized directly in the Prop 68 language, and that was through Senate Bill 5. So for instance, statewide parks is one that was called out by name, so they have to use similar guidelines. There was also legislative language that was included that really ties DPR's hands on what they can and can't do with those programs. But for other ones where it was not competitive, they did just allocate large portions of funding to various state agencies and let them determine either guidelines for allocation or for competitive programs if they so chose. So it is a little bit of both.
So I'm just thinking that we may need your services to do some lobbying for projects. If there's no competitive grant program, we might want to have an aggressive, I don't know how to describe it, but advocacy to make sure that in those instances where agencies have flexibility to identify projects they want to do, that we can still, do well. So.
Certainly, I wholeheartedly agree with that, and that actually segues very well into the next point for looking forward in the Sacramento advocacy trip, which we certainly encourage council and staff to take. This is an advocacy trip that we do all of the legwork for on the front end and the back end. We encourage council and appropriate staff to travel to Sacramento really early in the legislative session, so January is preferred, but early February could also work. This would coincide with the development of a legislative platform and the designation of a legislative subcommittee, which I believe staff is working with council on. So we would take the members of your legislative subcommittee to meet with your legislative delegation in Sacramento, specifically Assemblymember Berman, Senator Hill, and others, and really hammer home those points. We also have great relationships with DPR and would certainly get you in front of Secretary Laird and others to directly discuss those projects and the impediments that Half Moon Bay faces as opposed to other municipalities that may be larger. Your residents certainly are just as deserving as others. There could be less of them, but that doesn't mean your parks are any less deserving of funding. So those are the points that we would be driving home with your legislators and Secretary Laird.
Count me in on the trip.
It's really important, so if Harvey wants to go and somebody else and staff, I think we need to
You need to go.
plan that. Well, I have to be careful because I'm a legislative advocate already.
Be careful while you're there. Be careful while you go.
Okay, yeah, certainly. We'll be, obviously, it's October now, so this is the beginning. Probably by next month, we would have a draft itinerary for you with the individuals we'll be meeting with, and I'll be reaching out to their staff to get everything set up on the front end. We would drive any follow-up that occurs from that meeting, including, thank you letters, obviously, but specifically those projects and making sure that that's why I'm in Sacramento, so I can stay in their face, and they certainly won't forget about our great projects.
How's your foot doing?
Much better, thank you. So that kind of took it through the end of looking forward. We are looking at developing a legislative platform, and we are currently working with staff on submitting drafts of that. Ultimately, I think the process will be working with staff to create a draft legislative platform for your input and further direction. We would then go back and make any additional edits before it would be approved by council.
That's wonderful, thank you.
Perfect.
Does anybody have questions?
I'll just really briefly wrap up with the grant writing aspect. So I have quickly tallied our work through the year. In total, we have submitted 16 grants, 5 of which were funded at roughly $505,000. This once again goes back to the fantastic work of your staff. They were obviously involved every step of the process. There's a lot of information and documentation that we just can't produce as grant writers that we certainly are going to lean on your staff for, and they did a fantastic job every step of the process. We're currently still waiting on several grants from Caltrans, I believe, primarily. We've got 5 outstanding grants. We should hear back in December or January about those. Those include, larger dollar amounts such as Highway 1 improvements. Really briefly to note on that, for the Highway 1 improvements, we have recognized that a significant number of these do involve Caltrans right-of-way. So this is something that we've followed up with Caltrans District Director 4, and specifically the Local Assistance and Planning Deputy Director, to set up a meeting in the near future between your staff and the Deputy Director to really discuss the priority projects that the city does have going forward for Highway 1 and Highway 92. We acknowledge that a lot of that land is Caltrans right away, so we will need to be working closely hand in hand with them throughout the process. Eventually, we would like to elevate this to a higher level and perhaps have the Caltrans director and elected officials meet and discuss these projects. But for now, we're in the initial phases of getting these meetings on the books, ultimately with the goal of getting Caltrans to be bought in as a real partner with the city for a lot of these projects so that we can do them in tandem going forward, because some of them are significant dollar amounts.
Yeah, I think we've been doing a much better job the last couple of years in interagency relationships, and I think you can, help us with that as well. With Caltrans State Parks, I think we could do better locally. That's probably not your expertise local, but anything that we can do in Sacramento that helps the relationships locally with the local superintendent would be welcome.
Certainly, we would be happy to do that. We do have some great relationships at DPR across the state. And of course, one of my coworkers, Richard Harmon, actually was previously a Caltrans district director himself in the Central Valley, and he has a very good working relationship, excuse me, with your new district director, who was just recently appointed. So that's a relationship that we intend to maximize to its fullest potential. Great. Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. We are moving on to a strategic plan update. Matthew Chittister.
I'll also be joined by John, who will give you an update of the capital improvement program. So it's great to be before you again. This is an ongoing update that we've provided to you over the last year and plan to continue to do. We will be making modifications to how we present the information, not necessarily in these presentations, but on an ongoing basis. That'll be a priority as we get a new senior management analyst online within the city manager's office to really help the community and you see the progress of the work that we're doing on your key priorities. Gantt charts certainly could be part of it. I think there's a lot of different ways to display the information to make it interesting, make it something people want to look at and refer to, and also make it really clear and easy for people to see what's happening. So, just to recap, in spring of this year, you held your, what I consider to be highly successful city council listening sessions. We held 4 of those sessions, had hundreds of people attend and provide feedback and input to you on their concerns throughout the city. And that, of course, fed into your May City Council Priority Setting Workshop, which was a public workshop. It was an opportunity for staff to come and listen to you deliberate on your priorities and think about the future of the city. And ultimately, in that priority setting workshop, you affirmed your priority list from the prior year, although you established some new focus areas within each priority based on the progress we've made and changes to the landscape over the last year. The other thing you did there was affirmed our 5-year CIP list, capital improvement program list, and the timing of projects over the next fiscal year. And just by way of information, when we talk about our strategic plan, what we're really talking about are your strategic elements, which are the very high-level goals that we set as things that we want to accomplish as a city over a long term. And really everything that we do, all the work that we do, really should align with those strategic priorities, or strategic elements. The strategic plan also includes your priorities on an annual basis and the capital improvement program. So we provide you these updates semi-annually, And this will be the first presentation for this fiscal year, and then we will return in the spring to provide an update. But in the meantime, there will be, at the very least, quarterly updates on the city website, and the URL to view those is there. And these updates will be posted in the next couple of days so that anybody can look at the details of the work that we've been doing. But again, one of the things we're going to be looking at is if there's better ways to, in real time or on a much more frequent basis, show how these projects are moving forward and help people to see the work, the great work that we're doing here in the city, and especially the work that we're doing on your priorities that are set through community input. So the priorities that you reaffirmed, of course, are first and foremost affordable housing, homelessness, cannabis, short-term rentals, and the Parks Master Plan. And at this point, once the master plan has been approved, implementation of those recommendations. We also include what we're calling de facto priorities. These are items that have popped up that really are just, they have to be a priority. They're important to the city. They're, and two of them are listed here. Obviously, things like the work that Jill brought before you earlier and the street signs that John just brought to you just have to be taken care of immediately. So I'm just giving John a hard time. So in this case, I'm calling out the work we're doing with the Sewer Authority and the Voters' Rights Act, which has consumed a lot of staff time over the last several months, but is wrapped up. So what I'll be doing here is talking about the details that you called out in your priority setting session and provide just a brief update on each of these areas to the work that we're doing. So first, under affordable housing, the first kind of bullet point is to develop a plan to best utilize the city's affordable housing funds. We currently have around $2 million in funds that came through impact fees and other projects and are set aside for affordable housing. We don't currently have any sort of methodology or plan for how we're going to use those funds, and so you've asked that we develop that sort of a plan so that you can allocate those funds as opportunities arise. Going back to our September 4th meeting, the Community Development Department provided a housing work plan overview, which covered a lot of housing issues. But as part of that overview, they talked about some preliminary options for allocation of those funds and also replenishment. Right now, those are just static funds that are sitting there. There's ways that we can, on an ongoing basis, really replenish that account so that we have a revolving funding source to continue to tackle affordable housing projects. During that discussion, there were some thoughts, but really we've been asked to explore those further and come back in early 2019 with some options that you can really start to consider. So that'll be forthcoming in the next several months. The second bullet point is to continue our efforts to encourage accessory dwelling units and mixed-use rezoning within the city. And we're pleased to confirm that the ADU ordinance was approved by your council earlier this month, and it's currently been submitted to the Coastal Commission for certification, which will take several months. In the meantime, some of the modifications to requirements that the Coastside County Water District and the Fire District have made, along with this ADU ordinance once certified, will really streamline the time and the process for getting ADUs approved, as well as the costs, which I think really will encourage people to consider this type of development here in the city. And once we have certification from the Coastal Commission, staff is tentatively planning to host a workshop with the county sometime in the spring to really kick off the opportunity for people to start these types of developments. The last item under affordable housing is to consider possible tenant protections, but delay consideration of rent control until after the statewide ballot measure in November. The housing work plan that was presented to you in September included a number of short-term measures that could be implemented to help with tenant protections. You directed staff to research those options and to move forward with them as feasible. And California Proposition 10, which will be on the November 6th election, would actually repeal certain limitations on rent control. And so should that pass, the city would still have to take some action to consider rent limits here in Half Moon Bay. And again, just in this vein, I want to plug the conversation on housing on October 23rd, which really plays into all this because it provides an outlet for us to share some of this information with the community, but also gather feedback from them on how we can improve affordable housing here in the city. So it's kind of a bonus to that priority. Under homelessness, the first bullet was, of course, was to restore the current encampment site. At the time you set your priorities, we were preparing to close the encampment. We actually closed the encampment along Palosados Creek behind Safeway. Shortly after that meeting, we believe the closure of the encampment itself was successful. Many people received services, were connected to services. Several were connected to housing through that process. And the initial debris and garbage cleanup took place very quickly and within several weeks was completed. We are currently reviewing the environmental remediation plan that's been prepared by our environmental consultant, and we expect that work to move forward in the fall of this year and hopefully be completed early next year. We're also pleased that people have really respected the closure of that area. We have had a few breaches through the fencing and had to work with the sheriff's office to let people know they can't be back there. But we haven't had any re-encampment in those former encampment areas, which is great because that has allowed much of the foliage and nature to kind of return to how it should have been. I go down there on a pretty regular basis, and you can actually see it kind of coming back to life, which is really great. The second item is to respond to new encampments as they occur. As we know, closing the encampments was not solving homelessness in Half Moon Bay. It certainly connected us to the homeless and the providers that we work with here in Half Moon Bay, and we had some really positive results, but it only on a minimal basis really changed the situation for several people, and there's still a lot of folks out there that are living on the streets. We've worked with a couple of agencies to close encampments that have popped up over the last several months, and because they're areas that there weren't previous encampments and we're able to address them pretty quickly, they're much easier to address than the large cleanup that we did last year. Encampments have been closed at Carter Park, on private property on Wavecrest Road, and last week Caltrans completed cleanup work under the Highway 1 bridge, which was probably the hot spot for folks after the closure of our encampment, and that went really well. One of the things I will also say is, working with the homeless here in Half Moon Bay, it's always that fine line of respecting them as human beings and having compassion on their situation, but also taking care of needed work for environmental and safety reasons. And they've been really cooperative in those efforts. Caltrans does this a lot. They actually delayed it because they didn't have enough CHC support. And when they finally got that CHP support, they went down there and there were no incidents. People had actually done some work to clean up a little bit and made their job easier. We will be working with them on a continual basis because even though they've completed a cleanup, they didn't really do anything to prevent further encampment down there. So they've reached out to us and they want to meet to talk about some measures we can take to protect that area further.
Matthew?
Yes.
Do you know where the homeless people are living now?
So the HOT team continues to case manage many of these folks and work with them on a regular basis, and so we're pretty familiar with where most of them are. The main area that continues to need addressing is that area between Highway 1 and Main Street along the creek. There's private properties there. We're working with the private property owners there, and now that all the main areas along the creek have really been addressed, we'll be focusing a lot of time and resources on working with those private property owners to complete some work there so that we'll have a clean stretch of the creek to protect going forward. So there's a lot of folks there, and then there are other folks scattered throughout the city that we continue to work with. The last bullet point under homelessness is to continue to rely on county and nonprofit organizations to provide services. We've developed great relationships with the county, with our nonprofit providers, Abundant Grace, who we have a great work program doing beach cleanups that's been to date very successful, and we hope to continue with that and find other ways to employ that kind of approach to working with the homeless. And I'm pleased that we were able to hire a replacement for Jennifer Acuna. Victor Gaitan is our new management analyst in community services, and he's doing a great job connecting with these folks and moving that work forward. Cannabis, I will first start that the 4 bullet points that are underneath cannabis have all been completed, so we can actually check this one off. That being said, depending on what happens on November 5th, we may have to reopen this. So one of the things that you requested is that we complete the tax analysis and the white paper study and a community survey. The tax analysis was presented to you in June, and that helped us develop our tax measure for the November ballot. The white paper study, which included 9 case studies of other jurisdictions with similar cities and counties that have already implemented commercial cannabis, that was published earlier this month and helps give some insights into what's going on in other communities and the impacts they've experienced. Because everything else was put on the ballot, the council deemed the survey redundant, and we didn't move forward with that. As you know, the draft nursery ordinance is Measure GG on the ballot on November 6th. If approved, we would move forward with regulations to start taking applications shortly thereafter, and would address that process because it would take effect 10 days after the election. The advisory measures include measures EE, MM, and SS, and that, of course, is looking at full cultivation of cannabis, limited retail, and limited manufacturing. Were any of those to pass at this election, staff would immediately have to work on some policy matters to bring back to you for consideration, because we'd have to actually develop those ordinances. It wouldn't automatically become something that we could do. And then, of course, the tax ordinance is on the ballot, as well as Measure AA, and that would impact the city whether or not any of the other items passed, because we know that there are cannabis deliveries taking place, and it would protect us in the future if we don't have activity now in the future. If the city wanted to consider it, we'd already have that mechanism in place. So we'll consider that item complete, but we'll see what the future holds for that after the November election. Under short-term rentals, as you know, we have short-term rentals on the coast that are subject to our transient occupancy tax. Short-term rentals are your Airbnb type rentals of private homes and spaces to people visiting. And you want us to continue efforts to maximize our TOT collections. We're pleased to report that the short-term rental compliance efforts have yielded about $135,000 in revenue since we started the program. A total of 76 new short-term rental properties have been identified, including 13 more since our last update. 42 of those have registered and filed returns with the city. 21 have ceased rental. Once they realized they had to pay taxes, they actually ceased renting out their space. Our efforts have reduced the short-term rental tax delinquency, which was pretty prevalent. That's been reduced by 71%, and was only 5 properties in the last quarter that were delinquent. So I think the word's out that this is something that people need to register and be accountable to, and people understand that now and are coming into compliance. You also asked us to bring forward Planning Commission recommendations around a short-term rental ordinance, really regulating these short-term rentals. The Planning Commission held a study session in the spring, and staff is working with stakeholders to gather input on that potential ordinance. And there's some additional outreach planned before preparing a draft ordinance for Planning Commission review, which will be in the coming months. And then the last item was the Parks Master Plan. As you know, the Parks Master Plan has been an effort over the last 2 years that involved a lot of community input. It involves a look at all of our existing parks and makes recommendations how to improve them, and potentially look at future parks within the city. That's under environmental review right now, and hopefully we'll have that completed in the next several months so that we can really move forward with implementing the recommendations. What you have asked of staff this year is to initiate improvements at all of our existing parks facilities, so we could see an upgrade at each facility and all members of the community could really see an improvement in our parks. and complete at least one improvement project for each existing park. I can say that that's an ongoing effort, and there are projects that have been completed or under planning for every single park here in the city. A couple of highlights. We've completed electrical and lighting improvements at Carter Park, as well as we've kicked off the redevelopment planning, which this council asked staff to really focus on this year. Going back, and you'll see in the pictures on the left side, we held our first music festival on September 22nd. It was an ambitious endeavor. We had a lot of help from our rec commission members, and we have a subcommittee that helps us with concerts in the park. We were all a little nervous going into it. It was a major undertaking, and we had no idea what the response would be. I think I saw most of you there, and it was an incredible event. We had hundreds of people attend. I'm sure the free tacos were a draw. But I think what it did is it really proved a couple of things. One is that Carter Park really is a great venue for outdoor performances. You know, the Shakespeare folks have shown that for a long time for what they do, and I think we see the real, the opportunities that exist there, and it's proven now. So we hope to hold more of those types of events. I think we can get some good sponsors and get the community more involved. We have an architect that's done some preliminary designs, and they showed them off and gathered public input at that event. We'll be bringing it back to the Rec Commission for presentation and further comment about what the orientation can be and what the options are, and then ultimately we'll bring that plan back to you after some public and community outreach and input. And the goal is to have a plan that will be shovel-ready by the end of this year so that we can include it in our CIP next year and kick something off. And I'm very excited about that project. Another great project, and Jessica already touched on it, was our staff workday at Oak Avenue Park. That's a park that is in continuous need of work and a little bit of love and TLC. And I think our staff workday was really a positive move in the right direction. And as Jessica mentioned, we had people come from the community, and one woman actually was in tears. She was so happy to see some care and attention being brought to that park because she wants her kids to play there and she wants to be able to enjoy it. So we'll continue doing that kind of work, and I think the next step, they've already installed a patio. Some barbecues are going to go in there, so we're hoping to see some families use it for family events and for parties and barbecues and things like that. It's a beautiful park and right next to the creek. It's really a nice location. And then, of course, there's lots of other projects planned for our city parks. We're working with Post and the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District on, potential trailhead opportunities at the Johnston House and Train Depot property, which is a really great location for that. There's work going on at Smithfield and in all of our parks. And in talking with our public works staff, they have some really creative ideas how to make small improvements that really enhance these parks. So that work continues. The other item under the master plan, of course, is the community park siding, which was the priority last year. Once the master plan is approved, then we'll tackle that again and start looking for opportunities for a large community-wide park, kind of a passive use park where people can gather and just enjoy the outdoors, which is something that we're missing right now from our parks portfolio. And then under our de facto priorities, you're well aware of all the work with the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. I'm not qualified, nor do I want to give an update on that. I'll leave that to John when the time's appropriate. Under the Voters' Choice Act, which of course was the district elections, pleased to report that that work is done. You approved a map, and the first elections related to districting will take place in fall of 2020, and it'll include 2 districts and an at-large mayor. So that's it for our council priorities update. I'm happy to answer any questions about those. John has a short presentation on the capital improvement program as well, if you'd like to continue on with the presentation. Okay, John.
First, I will say this is proof positive that not all sewer activities are below ground. I don't know how they found this picture, but there we go. That is the IPS bypass lines being collected there, so. Thank you, Mayor, council members, Matthew, for the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about the capital improvements program and sort of how that all fits in. I will take a chance to just remind the community and you a little bit about what your kind of focus was for the 18-19. And what I'm afraid is that I'm not sure that we actually achieved a slightly less robust list of new major projects. It seems like it's the same huge list that we're fighting through, but that was the objective and we tried. I'm not sure if we gained that there. We also have been working toward integrating the smaller improvements through our Public Works Maintenance Division with the staffing up of that staff and program. We have been able to hit some of those things. I'm happy to announce that we were able to do some red curb painting today, and I'll send you pictures, and we'll be working on some of those things, and I know some of your constituents will be very happy, and others will not because they didn't get hit, but they're coming. That being said, we've had challenges. The unexpected vacancy of our Public Works Superintendent position really has thrown us off a bit because the Public Works Superintendent was intended to take on several of the projects that we had listed in the CIP, and with his departure and the time it's taken to fill, we've lost some time in place with that, but we'll try to catch up and work through that. I am happy to announce that we have an accepted offer letter from a candidate. Very excited and look to have them in the 1st of November to fill that position, and we'll introduce you when that comes around. With regard to the other aspects of our challenges, as you may or may not be aware, while the library opened on time and the grand opening was great, we have been working vigilantly and very long hours to try to close things out. We have had warranty issues. We've had issues of things not being yet completed to satisfaction, and we are holding the BHM's feet to the fire as well as their subcontractors. Unfortunately, we were anticipating being done with this a month ago in terms of the closeout. We are still well within identifying new punch list or reworking the punch list that we have and dealing with that. Yes?
So do we have a withhold amount that we're,
We have a large retention, the 10% retention, and we gave BHM notice that we would be using that retention to pay for all the consultant costs related to the work from September 29th forward. That did get their attention. We are working through it, and I want to say BHM is being responsive. They're struggling with getting their subcontractors back onto the site, and there's also always this friction point between whether it was the design issue or whether it was construction issue, and that doesn't stop after the building's built, and so we're working through that. So the good news is the building's great. It continues to operate. Everything is good, but we continue to have some issues, challenges, and struggles. But I can tell you, we were hoping again to be done with that closeout process a month ago, and we're still in it. And that is slowing us down in terms of being able to move forward in some of the other projects. So I don't like to be up here making excuses, but I want to put it out on the table and understand. And that's also why you have not seen the closeout documents for the library yet. So we're still working through it. So on to the projects list itself, and I'm not going to try to spend a lot of time here. We are working right now. I think we're close to having the permits from Caltrans for the Highway 1 at Kelly Avenue, parallel along Shoreline Station. We will not be able to build that anyway until after the rains and in the spring, early summer, which is the appropriate time to build that. But we are getting close to that point, and believe that we will have the permits in hand from Caltrans. And I think that'll be great news in combination with the bypass that was built for the sewer down at Ocean Avenue and Kelly. So combined with those two improvements, I think the future will look better for flooding issues and water issues down the way there. Park projects, Matthew hit on a lot of those, but We have done improvements at Poplar, continue to do that. We resurfaced there, we've restriped, and we are going to be implementing a pay-by-number process there with the parking kiosk. That'll allow us to actually do some fun things, which is to basically be able to, for events, to give them a code to use, and so we don't have to issue some kind of temporary parking passes and things for cleanups and things of that nature. So we think that'll be a great thing. We're planning on the installation of automatic door lock controllers for the park restrooms. And we are, with the new superintendent coming on, going to be focusing on the new restroom at Ocean View Park as other improvements. One of the things that we're also going to be involved with Frenchman's Creek Park is to start a community outreach and process to talk about what they would like to see and what the community as a whole would like to see for their play equipment replacement, which is scheduled for next fiscal year. So that'll be something we're working through on the park side as well. So public facilities and buildings, we're moving forward here. One of the things that I'm thrilled that we're going to be releasing the remove and replace R&R for sidewalks. That is going to be released here in the next couple of weeks. Roughly 300 locations that we're looking at to replace and repair and fix. I think the community's going to be excited by that. I know I will. And we've released the RFP, which will include Main Street tree trimming for probably just after the first of the year or so. One of the things I want to point out is the circle.
John?
Yes, sir.
The city is going to be paying for all that R&R?
Yes.
Okay.
That was your direction. Unfortunately, it's been on the list for a while, and we're finally getting to that point, along with we're also requesting that the utilities fix their spots as well. So we're taking care of the areas that are not utility related. That was the council's direction, in part, basically to say, look, if we're going to ask you to share in the liability and responsibility for maintenance, we need to make sure these sidewalks are in good condition in doing that. And so we did I call them the haircuts, but we did the trimming down of all the 2,700 locations, and then also the council authorized these 300 locations to be repaired and replaced. So we're hopeful that the money will go to allow for all 300 of those. Otherwise, we'll have to start to prioritize a little more with those or come back for a little more money. But yes.
Was I on the council when that happened? Because I don't remember it, frankly. I mean, I'm delighted. Don't misunderstand.
No.
You were
right.
You were part of the council.
Okay.
I think you were.
Yeah. All right.
But I
good for me.
You did a great job. Great policy decision. One of the things, and I feel like a bit of the harbinger of doom tonight as well, I brought you the discussion about our corp yard. I'm also going to tell you that the sheriff's substation facility is a mess. We have 30-plus-year-old modular structures there, 3 of them tied together, and they are starting to fall apart. The doors aren't opening right, they're not closing right, they're doing issues. So we have an assessment. Part of that assessment is to look at what can we do in the short term to make sure that this is safe and stable, and then also to look at really what the cost will be to deal with that. And I think one of the reasons we're kind of excited about the idea of this facilities plan is to be able to look at the entirety of this site and say, what is the best place to actually look for the substation to go? Is it a more public-facing location? Should it be back here still? Could we reactivate some of these things for more active park space, like outdoor pickleball or whatever it might be? So I think there's some great thoughts, great ideas, but the substation is a mess. The EOC is fine. It's a stick-built structure, but the substation itself is coming in. So we'll be bringing back, hopefully, either next month or a special December special for you to come back and talk about the needs and what we need to take a look at with that substation. And so he left, but I can tell you he calls me almost daily now with concerns and issues about doors not closing right and things of that nature. Sewer, we hit a lot of this, but we are really, I think, doing a lot and putting the ratepayers' money to work here to keep the system operating, to keep the collection system functioning, and to make those improvements where needed. And so I hope the brief presentation earlier helped put that out there, but we are looking at a lot of improvements and a lot of things moving forward. Street projects, well, you know, we completed the Correa Street reconstruction with the library, and I think that was a great project to complete. We're coming to the waning points of the 2018 street reconstruction project. We've completed those in the core area. We're off to Naples area. I think next week we'll be looking at paving out and reworking Naples and Railroad in the Roosevelt area. And then we'll be hitting Miramontes Point Road there, finishing up that segment from the mobile home park to the Highway 1 and putting in the sidewalk so people can access even the crosswalk and the bus stop there. Those are still in November. So we're looking in October for down by Roosevelt, and then by looking at November for the Miramontes Point area. And then we'll be also working on identifying the 2019 projects. Frankly, the Prop 6, we talked about this, but Prop 6 with regard to the gas tax is a huge issue. Not that it's, you know, that significant, but it's it's $400,000 or so that we're looking at from gas tax. That goes a long way in terms of making improvements to our streets, and so that's a big issue. We are, we've awarded design and environmental contract for Main Street Bridge, and soon we're going to be giving notices to the businesses in that area because we're going to be doing some geotechnical investigations and potholing and drilling. So that's coming soon, and so you'll see some activity from that. And so we're trying to give them ample notice of those and where we need to close out some of the parking spaces and things of that nature. We're talking about late October-ish at this point, or 1st of November. We actually put off some of the work because I didn't think we got enough notice out to the neighbors and the folks there dealing with that. Yeah. So one of the things that was the resounding answer at the Poplar Gateways project meeting we had out there with tacos as well, was the vertical access and fixing that, at least doing something to that. So we have kicked that off. We're working on that. We have a design contract that we're getting ready to award and start to work on permitting and talking to the Coastal Commission. And our biggest concern right now, while yes, it is the access, but if you look over the edge, you can see where the culvert runs from one side to the other of that. It has eroded down and eroded off that area, and we really need to deal with probably a flex pipe coming down the way and dissipating out to the beach, the storm water coming through that. So that'll be part of this project, what we're dealing with. Otherwise, we don't have to worry about it. We won't have a vertical access because it'll just be washed out. So. But we're hopeful for that, and so we're looking to hopefully try to build that in the spring before the main summertime comes and hit. We'll see how we go with that, but I think everybody's committed to dealing with that. So trail projects, again, we've got funding on several of those. We're moving forward. We had we didn't talk much about the bike and pedestrian plan, but we're moving forward with implementation on that in conjunction with adoption. Again, we have CEQA issues to deal with, but basically we have a plan in place. And so we've also been working with Townsend to look at grant funds and try to find the monies wherever possible. And let me just, before I take or answer any questions, or hopefully you say, or maybe you'll just say, forget it. I heard the questions about what are we doing to try to get information out there. So one of the things that David, from the very beginning, said we need to figure out how our presence is better on our website and around and getting information out there. So we have been working on a refined and redefined way of identifying and listing out our projects and putting brief descriptions of those projects and giving regular updates to those projects. Attached to that will be the Gantt charts you've been looking for. So those are trailing a bit behind there. And so we're working on that. So we're going to be uploading several of those projects now into the city projects side of the equation. We'll be trailing about half of those projects. There's about 14, 15, I think, that are going to be up initially with that, and then as we work through that. What I will say in that is what you'll see is, instead of us trying to keep track of every single change that ever occurred, kind of going down this list, you'll see the project description, you'll see information about it, and then there'll be basically a revision box that shows you what's the most up-to-date information available for that. And again, attached to a Gantt chart, which will show the project schedule and where we are and where we want to be from beginning to end from that. So it's been on my list. It's been on David's list. I'm happy to say we're getting closer to that reality, and the reason why part of Matthew and I were discussing this is hopefully that provides a more regular update for the capital improvements. We don't have to do this conversation every time. We can just sort of identify a few that we want to highlight rather than sort of having to go through the whole process and inform you and the community about where we are. So I think we've heard your concerns and issues.
Damn, we're getting some good staff work done. Thank you, especially tonight. Really, really great presentations.
Questions, anyone?
No, I'm going to invoke the ghost of Kowalczyk's past over here, but we still don't have anything in any of this stuff that is, I know this is more the overarching, but we don't have anything that's short, like a short term. We still don't have, and I hope we address that at some point moving forward.
Are you talking about the big win?
Yeah.
The beacon flag, the flagpole?
Yeah.
Yeah. We got Carter Park.
Yeah, which is fine.
Wow, that's going to be huge.
Yeah.
And the medians that we just approved, that's a quick win.
Yeah, that is a quick one.
Actually, I think a lot of the community will appreciate fixing the vertical access at Poplar Beach. That's really huge. So I think we should start, talking about that on our website and our community e-news like right away.
And I saw the bike and pedestrian master plan, which is good. I don't know, is that more of like an overarching, or are there particular recommendations that were pointed out in that one that we can kind of like start with, kind of the same way we did with the parks piece?
So the PED bike plan does have a list of projects that are somewhat, they're prioritized as being, these should be the priority projects that we focus on. The reason why they didn't actually number them and prioritize in that way was because funding sources flop around in terms of the things. And so they said, here's our list of the projects we think we should be looking at and trying to focus on, and also trying to tie into our other street improvement projects that we deal with. So there is that aspect in there. And then we continue to sort of just look wherever we can at links and missing links, whether it be sidewalk, whether it be the pathway, the trail, whatever those processes are. We're trying to look at the missing links and connect them wherever and whenever we can.
So is there a point at which you guys will provide kind of like your recommendation on what parts of that we could implement first, so we have a clear direction on how we're using it?
Sure. I didn't go into all the detail, and I'd be happy to sit down and talk to you individually as well. We have a number of projects that are listed in the CIP, in the Capital Improvement Program, that are part of the actual recommendations coming from the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee approval, their review and approval and recommendations. The challenge of all of this is it's extremely expensive, like everything else, and so we've got to figure out the priorities. Clearly, the Poplar Complete Street project that we were talking about, I think last week, or last meeting, seems like last week, but last meeting is an important piece, I think, to that linkage and that connectivity. Kelly Avenue Complete Street project. So a lot of those issues, just the signal and the improvements of the crosswalk and bike improvements at Kelly and Highway 1 is really necessary and needed, and is a project in and of itself to make that safer for everyone. So, and the East Side Trail is part of this as well. And we did receive one of the grants was, I think, about $375,000 for making the connection where it's missing on the East Side Trail north. And then the county was also, I believe, successful in getting grant funds to extend and connect their extension as well. So we're looking at being able to extend toward Princeton Harbor and make that East Side connection. Yep. And we will continue to scour the earth for funding. Alex left. Darn. But yes, we keep working with him and looking at the funding for that. That's the piece of that is the challenge because of the bridge across Frenchman's Creek is the critical linkage challenge on that. That's the $1.5 million problem, but it's not impossible to deal.
Yeah, it's good that we talk about all this, because the thing is, there's a lot, right? There's a lot of those pieces, but that's why I think it's so important to be like, all right, we're going to like, these are the two we can accomplish next year. I try to identify. I love that we've got Carter Park as like, all right, that's the one we're going for on that particular, and obviously there's all the rest of the park stuff going on. But it's like bike and pedestrian, what are the 5? Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 1, like what is it? Because there are quite a few out there, and I'm sure you've got a way to tie it into whatever else we're working on, but it'd be great to identify so we're all aware which one it is that we're focusing on. So let's get that. So then completion of the LCP. We don't really have that as one of our elements for some reason. There's a good answer. All right, let's see what you got.
We are so glad you asked. All right. So we are chunking away to get quite a few chapters out at the end of this month. We are planning for a special meeting. We always love a 5th Tuesday. We can rally our planning commission to come out a little bit extra. So there are a number of chapters that they've seen before that have been revamped per their input. And then we've been working diligently on the natural resources chapter with our biologist and our policy advisor. It's complex in Half Moon Bay, and the maps are highly detailed. They're very important, and we're taking it seriously. So we're looking forward to putting that chapter out. You're also going to see, I can rattle them off, agriculture, natural resources, coastal hazards, scenic and visual resources, cultural resources, if I already said that, I'm sorry, coastal access and rec, and I'm missing one. Hazards, maybe. Did I say hazards? I don't know. There's 6 or 7. There's 6, I think. So we'll have those end of October, and then we look forward to getting the input on that. We've been working with you asked us to encourage the Planning Commission to form a subcommittee. They did. We've been working frequently and with the subcommittee in meetings. They've been working really hard on draft documents, providing us with input. So we're humming along, and then I'm really hoping by the end of the year that we'll have development out. We're going to wait before we prepare Public Works because it's based on land use spelled out, and if development changes a lot, it's kind of a waste of time to run those numbers. We can run some round numbers, and we're happy to do that, but we don't want to. We're trying to really preserve our budget to get everything done and ready for you once the Planning Commission's done with it. We've also been reminded that our GPAC would love to check in on it, so we're trying to figure out some ways to intersect with them and give them an invitation back in so they can see where all their hard foundational work went. I'm looking forward to that too. So that's what we're doing. We're busy. That's why you're not going to see, I got to be frank, I don't have time to work on short-term rental outreach while we're finishing this bit. So you're gonna see a little bit of pushing and pulling on some of these things out of our shop. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jill.
And then the last one I have on here is 555 Kelly. I think I can't remember what the address was of that one, but obviously right here, which it sounds like we're tying that possibly in, which is great. But I do think that we need to, I mean, don't you think, I mean, like it's something else. So those are my.
Well, again, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you both. That was great. Now we'll move to future agenda items.
I would like to draft a letter in support of our immigrant community that is being potentially hounded by this new potential regulation that would not allow green cards issued to any immigrant who takes advantage of any federal program like food stamps or subsidized housing or anything like that. I think we need to be on record as opposing that sort of program that's antagonistic to our immigrant community. Just a letter in support, or maybe a resolution, something that shows that this council does not approve of that action that is in the hopper.
I'd like to propose that we look at Abundant Grace's group who are doing coastal cleanup right now as possibly moving into downtown and doing downtown street cleanup when it's beach time's over.
They have uniforms yet?
I don't care if they have uniforms.
We paid for it.
Yeah, just, little vests or something.
Uniforms.
Get vests. Now, I think I'd love to see to continue that program. It's an inexpensive program for us, and it helps the homeless. So let's keep them busy. Thank you, everyone.